So really kind of having lived, traveled, worked around the world, I don't look at my career as a straight line. It's been a zigzag, but I will say there was one common red thread, and that was around people.
Hello, and thank you for joining us at Inside C&A Digital, the podcast. Happy New Year. Boy, do I have a great podcast for you guys. Here I have Smita Pillai, who's the Chief Culture and DEI Officer at Regeneron. She is also a friend, and I am so thrilled to have you here, Smita. You have an amazing title with some important initiatives and bigger kind of important issues behind what you do. So tell our audience kind of a little bit about yourself and your role and maybe how you got to be there.
Yeah. Thank you again for having me here. Really looking forward to this conversation. So you're right. I have an interesting title. I'm the Senior Vice President for Culture and Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at Regeneron. And Regeneron is one of the most innovative biotechnology companies in the world. So I'm really proud to be with the company. The title actually reflects the importance that the company places on our culture and DEI being embedded into the core values of the company. And my role essentially is to make sure that as the company is scaling, which it is very rapidly,
Yes.
The magic of our culture, the fact that our culture is still, it's like a small company feeling, right? There is no bureaucracy. People can voice their opinions, and a good idea can come from anyone's head, and there is place on the table and at the table for people from different backgrounds. That is essentially my role, and I love it because the company truly wants to keep that magic alive as we're scaling, and that's the core of my role.
Yeah, it's very interesting. One of the things that I love, and guests come from everywhere to join us, but it's really exciting for me when there are so many synergies in what's important. So I know it's important to you around culture and diversity. Obviously, here at C&A Digital, you walk around the halls, you can see, we love that. And I love that you're in this role because I think it's so important. And I know like there are thoughts around it, but it's so important to have us at the table and to have like smart women doing this work. So thank you again for all of that. So how would you say your career has evolved over whatever period of time you'd like to go back?
Yeah, dating myself, but 23 plus years in corporate world, and it's been a fun ride. I was born and raised in India, so in a small town in India where most girls, the goal was to just find the perfect husband and get married and settle. So moving from there to having lived and worked in 5 different countries and multiple different sectors. I've worked in healthcare, so I've come a full circle back to healthcare, but healthcare, market research, technology, media. I've worked with the Wall Street Journal. I was their chief diversity officer at one point, and financial services. So really kind of having lived, traveled, worked around the world, I don't look at my career as a straight line. It's been a zigzag, but I will say there was one common red thread, and that was around people. That was around whether it's the patients, whether it's customers, whether it's our own employees or colleagues. It was always about what can I do in my power to enable people around me, to make sure that they feel like they belong. And especially when you travel the world the way I do and come from where I've come from, for example, people come with so many baggages and people come with so many privileges, and neither is their fault. But when you come into a company, how do you make sure that we can tell people these are your privileges, use it for the good, and acknowledge the baggages that people carry and create empathy and create space for that. And that's one of the best things that I've done in my career. So just going back on how I started, my career did not start with DEI. My career started with market research and social and ethnographic research. And I studied patients and I studied customers to understand where the company can launch its products. What can the company say to get the best out of their product or their service in the marketplace? Mm-hmm. That was kind of my segue into truly understanding the human brain, the human mind. And the segue into DEI came through Johnson & Johnson, where the chief diversity officer at that time, Dr. Anthony Carter, really felt he needed someone on his team, on his leadership team, who does not come from the classic HR background, but comes from the business, understand the patients, and therefore can bring DEI, and I'm dating myself, about 15 years ago, right? When the segue happened from my research background to DEI, I really give him a lot of kudos for bringing someone like me with absolutely zero kind of theoretical background on DEI, but really lived experiences around the world to say, when we talk about DEI at this company, we want people to say that this is important for the business. This is important for our patients. So that was my kind of, jump into DEI, and I never looked back after that.
Well, and it feels like a little ahead of the time. Like that was,
for sure,
not everybody was speaking that message,
sure.
And that narrative wasn't as common as it is today. So yeah, and we love Janssen too. They were our first client, so big up to Janssen. What would you say is the most important thing you've learned in your career?
Yeah, many things, but as I was driving up here, I was reflecting on another conversation I had with someone at work, and Maya Angelou's line always sticks out for me, which is, it's always come back time and again over my, like I said, 2+ decades of experience, which is, and you may have heard this, right? People forget what you said to them. People forget what actually happened, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
100%.
And it comes back over and over again, right? You could be the senior most leader. You could be a, entry level person. You could be a Gen Z. You could be a boomer. Who cares what your level is? But if you make the other person feel like they belong, they are important, and they are respected, that goes such a long way. And life is too short to make others feel anything less than who they are, right? Giving them the full respect that they deserve. So I think over my career, of all the lessons, I always try to remind myself and people around me that please, treat people with respect, because that goes such a long way.
Right. It's funny. I'm reading The Happiness Advantage now. And one of the, I'm probably a third of the way through, but last night when I was reading, it was talking about the benefit of kind of staying in the positive with kind of the feedback that leaders give.
Yeah.
And just the significant research around how much better people do when the feedback comes from a place of kind of looking out for them.
Good intention.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just good business practice.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think, certainly decades ago, it was the kind of strong, kind of rude boss that felt like got results. But today, I think culture is so much more important, and people are finally acknowledging the importance.
And I think another term here to bring is psychological safety. We had Professor Amy Edmondson. You may have heard about her. She's the person who coined the term psychological safety. She's written some amazing books on that, and we hosted her at our company event, and it was interesting because we were talking about psychological safety. And to your point, right? I mean, typically the thinking has been that you have to be direct. You have to be, psychological safety is this soft term that basically is saying you can't give direct feedback, that you cannot have honest conversations. It was fascinating as Professor Edmondson walked us through what psychological safety is. And psychological safety is not couching for, or holding back tough feedback. I think tough feedback is necessary for growth. But then again, it's going back to what I said about Maya Angelou. It's like, how are you making people feel, right? I'm sitting here and talking to you, and, do I have the psychological safety to say what's on my mind? And if I do, we will have an amazing podcast. And if I'm holding back, we'll have a very superficial podcast, right? So that's an interesting concept to also keep in mind as companies evolve, right? Are you allowing people to be themselves and giving them the space to ask the right questions? And especially for a science company, so important to build that, because then you never know, the next breakthrough idea is sitting at the table and just not finding the voice at the table.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things I love about your trajectory and your story is that some of this, corporate America often needs the business case for it, right? And so I think the fact that you don't come from a traditional HR background and you have kind of this diverse business experience helps to make that business case for why all of this around culture and diversity, which we're going to get to, is so important today. What's your favorite part about what you do?
People. It's without question, it's people. I light up when I have people around me who have all these questions and ideas, and they disagree with me. I love disagreements because it allows me to think bigger. And so personally, I love having people who have big, strong ideas. And again, the undertone of all of the discussions must be respect, right? It shouldn't come at any point from a place of you don't know what you're doing, right? Because everyone has a fairly good idea of what they're doing. They probably are kind of trying to figure out what's the best approach to do things. But I love the people element of my work, and this is where I think human resources and human capital plays a very important role, right? So especially as companies are growing and evolving, especially through the pandemic and beyond, we have seen HR play a significant role in terms of how people feel, the benefits they get, the flexibility they can offer or not, and how they can support people and their families. And if COVID taught us anything, it's that disparities exist, right? Whether it's health equity disparities, whether it's disparities within the workforce. One of the favorite sayings at that time during COVID was that we're all in the same storm, but not in the same boat.
Right.
So, there were executives who were
in yachts and some of us in canoes, right?
Or exactly.
Right.
Or actually physically in yachts, right? They were working from wherever, right?
Yes.
And then there were analysts who were sharing apartments with 5 other people trying to figure out how the Wi-Fi works.
Right.
Or there were young parents struggling with homeschooling of children and, crying babies and no support. So it was very important for human resources to step up. And I think in most good companies, including ours, they stepped up in a really big way.
Right. And wow, what an evolution of the job function, right? Coming out of that, which you couldn't have anticipated because nobody knew what was going to happen.
Absolutely.
Now, it's really interesting. One of the things that we're fascinated about, and one of the things that I can say, other than who you are, that I love about you is your LinkedIn profile, because you have mom listed there.
Yes.
So I'm going to take you, I want you to talk about why you did that, because I think for any working mom, for any mom, right? But any mom who's on LinkedIn, that's brave and it's powerful. But I want to hear from your perspective, what provoked you to list that as a job?
A great question, and it's not the first time I've been asked this question.
Sure.
Because so many women at different levels of the career have asked me this question, and I've actually been quite pleasantly surprised that this takes people by surprise, and a pleasant surprise, of course, that, wow, so glad you listed this. So I'll tell you, I've always been this very ambitious person. Even as a young child, young girl, young woman, it was always about doing the best and being the best and driving for the best. And early on, I just assumed I will have children, multiple children, have a big family. And it was very hard to realize that I did have some strong fertility issues. So we had to go through many IVF treatments, and it was heartbreaking for anyone who's listening and who knows what IVF is. It's extremely heartbreaking. Every time the process fails, it's extremely heartbreaking. It feels like you're a personal failure, even though there's nothing to do with you or your partner. It just feels like you're failing, right? So it was a lot of cycles and years before we had our first child. He's 13 now. And when he was born, I was ecstatic. I thought this is the best role I could play. But of course, within 12 weeks, I went back. That was the maternity leave at that time. And I went back to work, and I was very happy being a mom, being a working mom. And I still didn't put it on my LinkedIn because it's like, that's a separate part of my identity. And then came my twins. So I have twin girls. They are 10 now. So he was 3 years old. My son was 3 years old and 3.5 years old almost when my twins were born. And I remember 12 weeks after having twins, it was really hard. A 3.5-year-old, less than 3.5-year-old child, a boy at home, and twin girls, and going back to work at week 12. And I remember my first meeting with someone, and they asked me about, it was an introductory meeting. They asked me about, how many children do you have? And I said, I just came back from maternity. I have 3. And without blinking, this person who happened to be a woman, and she said, oh, wow, I would never, if you were serious about your career, you would never have more than 1 child. And it was shocking for me. It was shocking that I'd just come off maternity. I adored being a mom, and I thought I could do it all. And frankly, Elena, you know this. I mean, you can't do it all the time, but you can do it all over a period of time.
Sure.
You just need to have
Not at the
strong
same
allies.
time.
Not at the same time.
Right, but-
And that's when I decided that I need to put it out there. I'm not going to hide the fact that I have 3 young children at home. I'm going to put it out there, and I am going to be my best self at work, but I'm also going to be my most vulnerable self at work. So if my children are not doing well, my people at work need to know that I need space. I need time, I need space. So I put that on my profile, and I've never taken it away. So I've been a mom. So it's on my LinkedIn profile now 13 years. So I've had that for, I think, almost 10 years, almost 9 to 10 years.
So I love that. I love that. And I'm trying not to tear up as a mom. And, I'm super kind of candid. I also have 3 kids. But, when I think about when I started my career, when I think about what you heard, and like how you turn that pain into power, and how through you kind of keeping it up there for 13 years and then speaking publicly about it, my hope is that it empowers other women to really own every aspect of who they are. And I think, it's impactful. Interestingly, Smita, yesterday my team surprised me with this very random video while I was working in the kitchen, and it was a thank you video. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know why everybody had converged on the kitchen at the same time. But anyway, I was listening to these people kind of talk about whatever they were talking about in terms of me. And one of the things that struck me the most was one of my male employees said that what he admired the most was the entrepreneur and being able to raise 3, and my kids you'll often find them in this office, and 3 like beautiful kids, and how that's inspirational to him.
Yeah.
And I just thought,
Love
wow.
it. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Because of course I have a lot of powerhouse women here, and my hope is that I can be an example for a lot of people, but it was just really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I loved that part of it. I loved the whole thing, but it was very cool because what that does is that empowers all people.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, for every successful woman, there is an entire village behind her.
Sure.
You know that for sure, right? I mean,
Yes.
your children have to be strong and independent. Your spouse, or your partner has to be extremely supportive. I mean, if you have other people in your village, you need that support system. No woman, I don't think it is really hard to be successful on your own. Right? And there's another African proverb that I love, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go further,
Right.
go together.
Tell me about your village. Who would you count as the circle of people who are with you today, have motivated you from a younger point?
Yeah.
Like who makes up your village?
Super early, like I said earlier in this interview, that I come from a relatively second-tier city in India, and it's grown over the years. But when I was growing up, that ambition and girls didn't go together, right? It was more about study, keep your head down, and do something which will get you married into a good household, and you can be successful because you're married to a good guy, and that's your family's your success. So early on, having my father heavily influenced how I showed up in different places, whether it's the basketball court as the shortest girl on the team, but probably the most feisty one.
Fire. Yes.
Right? Or being the topper in the class, or demanding what is fair or what is right. And he always had my back. He never once said, step back or don't talk loud. So I think just early on, having that person having your back, that really gave me that almost this this wind on my back, right? There was this push that I can do further things and bigger things. And then I've been very fortunate to meet, and I said earlier that I love people, and I love people who argue, and I love people who push back and, expect me to defend my idea. And I couldn't have found a better person than my husband who fits that bill. There is not a single day since I've met him now. Oh my God, I'm losing maybe at least 25 years ago, but we've 27 years maybe. We've been married 21 years. I have to really think hard of a day when we've not argued, right? And
nobody's bored in the house.
Nobody's bored. The children are definitely not bored. And I love that because he always makes me think bigger, think differently, and keeps me humble, keeps me grounded. And I definitely have to name him as a big part of my village. I know there is no way I could have traveled around the world and had 3 children and happy, beautiful children, just really happy children, without having a strong partner like him. And then my girlfriends, I really have a really tight group of girlfriends who I lean on, whether it's to share a success or to say that I had a really disappointing day. One of them is my best friend, and I love her to death. I call her the gin in my tonic, gin and tonic. She's the gin in my gin and tonic. And my mother, she's been a rock solid support. And I think having this intergenerational support is so important for, many people cannot afford to have that for various reasons. And sure. I've been very fortunate to have my in-laws and my mom, after my dad passed away, to really be here to support me through, long hours of work and just making sure my kids have the flavor of Indian food, even if I'm not home to cook for them, right? So and then neighbors have been fantastic, right? My neighbors back in Princeton, New Jersey, where we lived, and all the way here to Chappaqua, right? Just a really big community of people who step up to support you as a working mother, as a spouse, as a partner, as a community member. And then colleagues. I've made some of my best friends working in different companies around the world. And so I think the village is really big, and it is who you make it out to be.
Sure. And I think it's also, one of the questions here is about a personality trait that might have helped you. But I think even our audience can see you have this village because of who you are and how you make people feel, right? Because I don't think it's certainly not luck, and it's not coincidence. So I think your priority on people and relationship is probably a huge contributor to the fact that you have a beautiful village, right?
Yeah, that is kind of you.
But I'm going to ask you anyway, what do you think is the personality trait that's helped you achieve your goals? Yeah. Like, what do you think is the main one?
I think there are 2. So one is humility, right? Always going in saying, I'm not the expert, right? Even though you're pretty well read, you know what you're doing. Right. You've got a very good idea of what needs to be done. But going in, the first line should be, I don't know everything. I want to hear from you. So having that humility at every step of the way has really gone a long, long, long way in terms of getting people in my inner circle, right? Because people are not fools, right? Especially as you grow in your career, you meet very accomplished people, sure. And you can't fool them, and you don't want to fool them, right? You want to be yourself, you want to be authentic, and if you have humility at the core of who you are, it doesn't matter if you're talking to a world-renowned scientist or a Pulitzer Prize winner writer. They know that you're not coming in there to challenge, you're coming in there to truly be open and learn. So humility has gone a very long way. And I will also say it's not just humility, it's humility and confidence, right? So the other side of the coin is confidence, right? I mean, you can't be so humble that people walk all over you. You've got to, especially as a woman of color, you've got to know when do you draw the line and say, okay, now, I've been pretty humble. Now I need to step up and be confident and tell them what I know and what I intend to do. So I think it's a very fine balance.
It's an art. It's not a science.
It's an art. Yes. But I think if you can keep that in mind about humility and confidence, that goes a very long way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and I love that it's humility, because I think anybody who a lot of our audience will be your fans. So they know kind of the powerhouse that you are in business. So that must be kind of intimidating when you talk to a lot of people. So the fact that you kind of put people at ease right from the beginning.
Yeah, that's one adjective I've never heard about for me.
Yeah.
Never. That I'm intimidating.
Never. Yeah, but
in my entire career.
If people just read your resume, they could be, right? Yeah. I think you put people at ease, but certainly impressive, which some people are intimidated by.
Thank you.
Now, so we talked a little bit about your career and your work. Yeah. Now, you have a lot of things that you do outside of work, other than being super ambitious at Regeneron and moving your way through that, and motherhood and family and social. Talk to us a little bit about the life outside of work. What are these causes that you support that are really important to you, and why?
Yeah. So like I said, I was born and raised in India, and although I've, since the past 2+ decades lived and worked across the world, my heart still belongs in India. And every time I go back home, every cell in my body just comes alive. I just feel like I'm home. And I love America. I love the opportunities it's offered me, my husband, and our children. And I love America for the greatness and the opportunities it gives everyone. And despite everything that's going on right now, it is a fantastic country and very proud to be an American. But in my heart, my heart belongs to India, and a lot of my philanthropic activities and social work and the connection is back to my roots. So one of the things that I decided last year finally was to be an angel investor. It's my first time investing in a small startup. It started by a young woman in India, and it is around sustainable fashion. And it's a two-pronged approach to the business model, which is one, we need to save the age-old craftsmanship in India, as well as give fair labor charges and labor, and bring that kind of entire village and community of craftsmen to a decent living standard.
Sure.
So that's one. And the other
What's
thing
the name?
is
So if
Kavana is the name of the company. And again, like I said, it started by this young 20-something woman, and she graduated from the National Institute of Fashion Technology and said, I don't want to take a high-paying job. I truly believe in sustainability.
Sure.
So sustainability from a craftsman perspective, sustainability from the environment perspective, and sustainability of our age-old traditional wear. It's called a sari in India. And if I had it my way, I would be wearing saris 365 days a year. I love saris. It's a beautiful garment. And she's really at the age of, she's probably mid-20s, to go ahead and have the gumption, the guts to go ahead and invest her savings, her parents' saving into this business. And when they approached me with this idea, I said, okay, I've been on the sidelines thinking I need to do something. So here's a young woman who's doing it, and I'm going to invest in it. So I'm very proud to have invested in that, and they're doing phenomenal work, giving back to the community and saving the age-old craftsmanship and saris in India.
Is there a website? Is it available online?
Yes,
How do
it is,
people,
it is.
What if they're interested? How would they get involved?
Oh, no, absolutely. There's a website. They have a page on Instagram. It's Kavana India, and you can follow them on Instagram. They do beautiful work. It's 100% organic, 100% vegetable dye. They do some exquisite work. I'm happy to show that off to you later on.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Tell us a little bit more about, I know Lotus Circle Advisor. Talk to us a little bit about your other philanthropic endeavors.
Yes. A lot of it, again, connected back to Asia, because I do think, there's this Google fundraiser at one point. She was on stage, and I love the line she said, which is, she said, $1 goes such a long way in Asia, and she was talking about Africa and Asia, and I was thinking about it, right? I mean, currently the exchange rate, at least in India, is 80 rupees for $1. So, $1, of course, there's so much work to be done in United States, and which we continue to do. But from a personal point of view, I try to connect to non-profits and associations that give back to Asia, because there's so many things to do. Particularly, the Asia Foundation is one of them. So I'm one of their Lotus advisors, which means I give, of course, my intellect and my brain power in kind of guiding where they should be investing their non-profit dollars. But also, like recently, last year, September of last year, I was in India, and I was with the Asia Foundation in Mumbai, India, with the nonprofit called the Gender Lab, and you can look it up. The Gender Lab that truly talks about debunking myths around gender norms very early on in schools, right?
Okay.
So if you raise boys who are thinking of girls being their equal and being respectful to them, you will probably erase so many things in the society, whether it's violence against women, whether it's disrespect, or whether it's, many of the things that you see in media against women. There are some things that you can contribute if you raise boys well. And that is what Gender Lab does. And that's one of the examples that I contribute to, which is, I think there are so many things that Asia, and particularly India, is so far behind than most of the Western nations, that I feel like whatever little I can do, whether it's dollars or whether it's my time or my intellect, if I can contribute towards that, I do that. And then, of course, in the US, I'm a part of the advisory board for Catalyst. I'm also, which is the largest nonprofit for gender equity around the globe, particularly here in the US and Europe. I'm also on the board for EGAL, which is Berkeley's arm for gender equity and leadership. So we recently launched this program called Equity Fluent Leadership, which is a special program which Berkeley offers as a certification for executives to stand up and be the right leader, which is Equity Fluent Leader.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I think part of what helps ambitious people, women move forward is the understanding that with the one of the advantages of being successful is that you can then use your influence to help causes that are important to you. Yeah. And, that's one of my favorite. I mean, so the ambitious side of me connects with you, the DE&I, the emphasis on culture, as a relatively small business compared with Regeneron, we won the number 2 spot of best places to work in Westchester.
Wonderful.
And it was the first year we applied. You can't buy the award. Like you have to actually go through the process.
You cannot buy that.
And it was just that was one of my favorite awards, and we win awards because it spoke to all of the work that the leadership team does here to make people feel like it's a really great use of their time to come to work here.
Wonderful. That's kudos to your leadership.
Right. Oh, yeah. We are really fortunate to have some of the top leaders in Westchester coming to work here. I am super excited about that. Now, we're going to come to a close, but before we do, what should I have asked you that I didn't know enough to ask?
I think you've covered your bases here completely, but perhaps if I could talk a little bit about staying true to your roots, especially as an immigrant in the country, it is really hard. So I don't know if you want to talk about that or.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, like I said, India is in my heart, and it's really difficult. I am an American. My children are absolutely American. They identify as American first, and, they just look brown, but they are, they're just American. And I have this funny line, which I say that, 3 times in a row, in a week, if I cook Indian food, my children, all 3 of them roll their eyes, again, Indian, right? So it's like, who are you? And,
right.
Like,
yes.
But I think it's so important that people, no matter where you come from, are proud of where you come from, right? Don't hide where you come from. And it's a journey. Like sometimes we try to hide where we come from because it's not so cool, or it's not the right thing, or maybe we just want to kind of just blend in and not stand out. And I think there's a really nice, respectful, beautiful way of standing out and standing up for your culture and your roots without alienating anyone else. And that's my goal as a mother, as a human being, to teach the next generation that, you should be proud of your roots. You may be far away from your roots, but you should, if you don't know where you came from, and if you don't acknowledge and respect that, you won't go too far, right? So you should just think about your roots and honor and respect that as you move forward in your life.
Yeah, I think it makes you powerful. I think, but that's also a transition. I have to be honest with you. My father, Jen, came here to New York. The name of the game was assimilation.
Yeah.
It was learn English as fast as possible, lose the Spanish, don't look Spanish. And it was the opposite.
That was the time. Yeah.
Right. So his gen, a lot of the children my age didn't learn Spanish. Not all.
Yeah.
But many didn't because they felt like they wanted to give us the advantage.
Yeah.
And the advantage was to become as American as possible, as quickly as possible.
They did what was right for their family at that time.
Correct.
Yes.
And my grandmother was interesting. She's like, if you don't speak Spanish, I just won't speak to you. And so, and she was kind of that dynamic that represented actually where the future is, which is here now.
It's fascinating.
What you're talking about.
Yes.
And
such a beautiful story.
Yes. And I want to say it was beautiful sitting here and talking with you. Thank you for sharing with our audience. Thank you for sharing with me. It's always great to see you, but this is even better. So
thank you.
I think our audience has gotten a lot from it. So I thank you. And I thank you for joining us at C&A Digital Inside, the podcast. I'll see you next time.